Hey there, men. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. In the last episode, I talked about plan, execute, and repeat. And those are the simple ingredients to get things done. But what I didn't talk about was why we fail to plan, why we fail to execute, the things that sabotage ourselves. And that's exactly what this episode is going to be all about. So, in the last episode, I mentioned that if you're not getting your goals accomplished, you've got to plan things out and you've got to execute against that plan. Then you just do that again and again with some time in there to kind of reconsider that plan, make some modifications and things of that nature. But really, that's really it. That's how things get accomplished. You want to write a book, you plan out the book, at least in its simplest forms, and you begin writing. You give yourself a date by which that book needs to get done, and then you just go to town on it. The same thing with weight loss, same thing with fitness, same thing with fixing your marriage or being a better father, so on and so forth. But why do we fail to plan? Why do we fail to execute? What are the things that get in our way? Why do we sabotage ourselves? And why do we sometimes not even get started? So that's really what I want to cover today. And I'm not going to be able to do this exhaustively, but I'm going to at least open the door a little bit and you guys can peek in. And I do want to give you some resources that I think are going to be beneficial to you, especially if you're getting started on this journey of making yourself a better man, if you're trying to accomplish some new goals in life where you've failed previously. I think this is going to be really valuable to you guys. So planning. Well, one of the big reasons that we fail to plan is we have a number of excuses that just cut us off at the gate. I'll kind of give you guys an example here from my own life. My wife and I have wanted to go to Italy for years, and it's always been sort of a dream, right? And we've kind of moved from this phase of, like, Italy would be nice, that'd be really cool, to, we actually want to go. Like, we'd love to go to Italy. But I'll be honest, it's daunting for me. I've never done much traveling in my life. I've been to a couple of cities here and there, flown a bit and that kind of stuff. Doing it by myself is not a big deal, but, the idea of going with the family to doing a European vacation, I don't even know how to say it right, European? European vacation, that's a whole nother thing for me, and it's a bit scary. Now, part of it is this serious, adventure thing as well. I want to plan it out, and I want to go and do that. But there's been a number of hang-ups over our life regarding going on any kind of big trips. One, both of our kids had autism type of issues, especially when they were early in age, and so travel was just hard in general. You add into that we've got food allergy issues, and you add into that we were broke most of the time, or at least going paycheck to paycheck. And also, my wife has never flown before and actually was terrified of it for a number of years. So you add into these things, and we've got a number of excuses that just come up and say, well, that's for other people, really, or it's not really the right time in life to go and do that. And so we don't even sit down and plan. Now, what would have been cool if I could go back in time would be to really begin to investigate, plan this trip out, think about what it's going to be like when the day comes that we can make this happen, and also ways to overcome the obstacles. That could be part of the plan as well. And so that's what I'm doing now. My wife doesn't know about this, actually, because she doesn't listen to the podcast, so I think this is safe. But I'm sort of covertly planning this trip to Italy, and it's including things like, how do we eat there gluten-free, and how do we kind of get past some of these barriers. What's it going to cost? Where are we going to stay? Where are the places to go? What are we going to see? How long are we going to be there? Those kinds of things. And I want to get a lot of this stuff sort of planned out of the gate so that when she sees that we're going to go to Italy and we can finally put it on the calendar, and she knows what the plan is, and a lot of the excuses or a lot of the fears are alleviated, right? But that's planning. That's what that looks like. But we sabotage ourselves because we've just got these hang-ups. Sometimes we even say things like, that's just not for me. I'm not that guy. And maybe it's subconscious. Other people are the ones that travel. Other people are the ones who have successful careers. I'm just the guy that just sits back and takes it easy and just kind of takes whatever life gives me. but we've got to sort those things out. And we got to sit down and we got to plan. So we've got a lot of procrastination is a big part of it. So we procrastinate. We don't want to get started on something for a number of reasons. Some of that is the fear of starting the process and just seeing that we can't actually complete it, right? And that kind of leads into my next piece. Why don't we execute? Actually, before I jump into that, I want to tell you guys about a book that I think that's helpful for anybody who has a passion that they want to really just knuckle down on and get going with. It's a book by Stephen. This is what sucks about driving in the car, doing this, in the truck rather. Stephen Pressfield, that's his name. Stephen Pressfield wrote a book named The War of Art, and kind of a take on the Art of War title there, but The War of Art. It's a great book, and he does it from a writer's perspective, but he basically just blows away all of your ideas about, this. I'll get started when I feel like it. That I don't know, that writer, the successful writers are just these guys that just sit up in a shack, and when they get an inspiration, they write 5 words, and then they go back and sip coffee and drink wine and whatever else. And that's not the way it works for anything that's successful in life that I know of. And so he does a really good job of just getting you pumped up to get going and get started on whatever it is. And so Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art, go read that. The Art of War is good as well, but it's a totally different thing. The next piece is, why don't we execute? Well, a lot of times we don't execute because we're worried about failing. At the end of the day, so many of our things that we don't start in life is because we're afraid of failure. And this is especially true for those of you who are more in the perfectionist mindset. I'm not that guy, but for those of you who are thinking, I don't want to start this until I've got it absolutely all my ducks in a row, until I know exactly how it's going to turn out, and that success is all but a guarantee. And the reason we feel that way is that we're such a harsh critic on ourselves, and we don't want to fail. We're afraid of failing. We're afraid of not doing it to the nth degree. And so we just don't get started. So we just postpone. We postpone the planning. We, even if we have a plan, if that plan's not right, we want to execute against it because we don't feel like everything's there. In the software world, you never knew really what you're going to walk into. A client may ask for something to the best of their ability and say, we want a system that does X, Y, and Z. And you come in and say, okay, it's going to cost $100,000 to build a system that does X, Y, and Z. And you get in there and that they don't even have, A through whatever comes before X established yet, or that everything's just messed up, or that there's a bigger issue, or that they don't really even know what they need, right? And this happens all throughout the development process. And so what we would find is that as long as we had about 60 to 70% of the information, we could get started and then just kind of figure things out as we go. And you got to be able to do that, guys. You got to be able to say, I'm going to execute against the plan that I have, reevaluate the plan as needed, but I'm going to get started. It's never going to be perfect, and that's okay. There's some things that you're not going to know until you actually begin executing. There's another book by Jon Acuff, nailed it, called Start, which I've not read, but I have read the companion book to that, sort of a bookend called Finish. And John does a really good job from his own perspective of talking about the reasons we don't start and perfectionism and things like that getting in the way. And so he kind of, like I said, he bookends this both from the starting perspective and from the finishing perspective. You got something started, but you can't finish it. You got something, and vice versa. So Jon Acuff, Start, and then the companion book, Finish. I don't know if there's a middle book there that sandwiches those two together, but that would be smart if you wrote that. But that's going to help you guys out that struggle with this idea of, I can't start because I just don't know if I can really get this done the way I want it to be done and be proud of what I've accomplished. I may fail. So that's it, guys. Those are some of the reasons why we don't plan, why we don't execute. I think there's more to it than that. Like I said, I'm not going to go exhaustively into this, but I want to hear your thoughts on this. A great place to put your thoughts in this particular for these particular episodes is just head over to the Wolf and Iron community. And if you're not a part of that, that's our free online Facebook group. Excuse me. You can head over there by going to wolfandiron.com/the group, and that'll take you over to the Facebook group page where you can actually sign up. You'll have some questions to answer. But once you get in there, throw it out there. Hey guys, Mike talked about this thing about planning and executing. Why we don't start? What's the deal? Why don't we do this? Let's hear some thoughts. I love to see this as a discussion because I think there's a lot more out there. I'm a guy who, from my perspective, just so you guys know, I'm not a perfectionist at all. I very much fit into the category of being totally comfortable with having only 20% of the information and getting started on something. But as I get older and a little bit further down the road, I realize that I'm kind of risk averse, to be honest, which is kind of crazy because I have businesses, I've quit my job, and I've done other things. But I don't like to do things that I feel like are just an unnecessary risk. And so a lot of my planning that goes into stuff before I execute is just kind of evaluating what are the risks involved? What's the chances of success? How can I mitigate my risk? And so that I know this is going to be successful. Kind of back to the Italy trip. I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to go to Italy. I'm not going to just say, well, I've got 20% of my information to make this trip happen and then book a flight. So this could be a disaster, right? This is going to be an investment as well. So I want to make sure that that's going to be as successful as possible. So I definitely want to be 80 or 90% confident in that I have all the information that I need to make this trip successful. And the last 10 or 15% we can kind of make up as we go when we get there. There's going to be some things we just don't know until we arrive. And so I'm a little bit more risk averse. So I do a lot of upfront planning, and a lot of it is, especially for Wolf and Iron stuff, it's imagination work. It's introverted thought work that's taking place far more than it is just executing. And so that's kind of how I operate. And then the execution phase usually goes pretty well because I've done a good bit of planning up front. Some of you guys are the opposite. Maybe you don't plan enough, and so we try to execute too soon, and it just falls apart. And that makes you more adverse to going into a new venture of some kind. So make sure you've got a good plan in place. You don't have to know everything. And then get started. Get busy making it happen. All right, fellas. That's all I got for today. Talk to you later.